So before we hop into actually filming Kimberlea for this section, I wanted to just do a brief run through of the environment that we're shooting in. So that way you can better relate to this type of scenario where you're at your house and you're looking at your scenario and you want to shoot a good looking image that's a lot more, a good looking scene or scenario that's a lot more casual. So if we take a wide shot and get to see this entire place, we can see that there's three primary natural sources of light. And this is the most important part of choosing where you want to shoot in your environment. Here is the first option. We would have the subject facing the window so that the majority of the light would be hitting their face, of course. The problem with that is if we flip around, this backdrop and here doesn't look so good. We have, this kind of stuff in the background. It doesn't look very clean, right? So if we go to our next option, this is our second primary source of light. What we might be able to do here is open up this window so that we can have the subject facing the light. But as you can see from this image, there's really not a whole lot of natural light coming in through this window, at least at this time of day. So that's something that you want to keep in mind is, are you shooting at noon? Are you shooting at sunset? What side of your house is getting light at which time of day? If you're going to choose a more permanent setup at your house using natural light, that is something you really want to keep in mind is, what time of day do you want to shoot and how is the lighting at that time of day? Here, if we were to set up the subject here, have the lighting, it doesn't work without really having to move around the different things at this house. So option 2 is really out of the question. Now, if we go to option 3 over here, we have this source of light that is coming in with a lot of diffuse light. We have Kimberlea in the background doing her thing. So we have this large natural light right here. And the reason I went for this in this situation was because we have a light source that's getting great quality light for a lot of the different times of day. The way that the light is bouncing off the other buildings, the white fence outside, is perfect for what we're looking for. The other reason I chose to do this, and the other thing you want to keep in mind, is how much can you control the lighting in the background of you when you're shooting in a natural light scenario. Here we're able to really cut the light, meaning we keep the exposure of what is behind me very low, okay? And then we can add practicals that you'll see in the following learning lesson of what the practicals are doing. And this is really the most ideal setup for this person's house, for Kimberlea's place. So you're going to have a few different options at your house or wherever you want to shoot. You want to look at all your options. In this case, we had 3. We weighed out the pros and cons of each option, and then we go ahead and choose where we want to shoot, get our setup in, get our settings right, and get everything dialed in, which is what you're going to see in the next learning lesson. So for this setup, what we're going to be doing is we're Kimberlea's place, and this setup's going to be a little bit more difficult and a little bit more on the go. I wanted to give you an example of if you don't have an artificial lighting source, you don't have any external lighting, or you wanted to do something that maybe looked a little bit more casual and a little bit less produced, using natural light is perfect for that kind of scenario. So what we're going to be doing is taking a look in this situation to find where we can find a really good source of natural light coming through a window, coming through a doorway, and then we're also going to, of course, use the proper focal length, proper framing, but more importantly, we're going to use exposure, contrast, and separation from our subject to the background to really create an image that looks good because we don't have a rim light or a hair light and we don't have bright artificial light to really make it look good. So with that said, we're going to take Kimberlea and we're going to choose a backdrop, and then we're going to set everything up with the proper settings. So what we're going to do is actually take this area of the house and turn this into the setup. So right now it doesn't really look like much, but what we're going to do is open up this door. Oh, you see? This is a huge natural diffuse lighting scenario. Because we're not getting direct light from the sun that would create harsh shadows, we have the sun bouncing off white walls, we have the sun bouncing off the fence, which is going to be perfect for getting really soft looking natural light. So the next thing that we're going to do is look at the direction that we're going to be filming. Because this is our main lighting source, we want to have our subject obviously facing that main source, but we want to keep in mind what is going to be in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up this camera, bada boom. So I'm going to go ahead and hit record on this camera to see what we're working with here with the backdrop. Of course, for this scenario, I would generally have a little bit more of a minimal background, but for something that's really easy, and if you guys want to pull out the camera to film a video at your house, we're focusing more on getting a good lighting setup and how to really use natural light. Don't focus too much on the background for this kind of scenario. So now that I know where I want to shoot, because we have this really nice natural lighting setup, we're going to do a before shot before we go into making the footage actually look good. So here's Kimberlea in. We're not paying attention to setting a good focal length, where our exposure is off, and really the lighting is just not good. So we're going to start from scratch and really build this up to a really good before and a really good after. And now first step, we are opening the door and not hitting the wall. Perfect. So now we have a really good natural light source, and we're shooting at 24 frames a second, and we're going to move our shutter speed up to 1/50th. So we're doubling the speed of our frame rate. That's going to give us a really nice natural motion blur. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is open up our aperture all the way. Because we don't have any external lighting, it's going to be really important to have a shallow depth of field to make this image look as good as possible. So I'm going to open up all the way, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Kimberlea, you can step forward. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to raise the camera up. This is going to be her new style of shooting. She's going to always be standing in her future videos, so check out her YouTube channel for that. Okay, so this is looking pretty good already. Our white balance is already set pretty good, but let's just check if we move it up just a little bit. So our Kelvin rating, temperature is going to be at 5,000. And that's looking pretty good. So if we want to have a more intimate feeling of really feeling connected to our audience while we're talking, we would want a closer angle like this. Of course, you want to frame the eyes on the third. And if we want something a little bit, let me move that up a little bit. If we want something a little bit more informal or a little bit more fun and less planned, we would shoot wider like that. So this is looking pretty good so far. I think the next thing that what we would be doing in this situation is taking a look at what in the background we can turn down to create even more separation between her and the background. So what I'm going to do is flip these lights off. So we're turning on a practical in the background. Of course, this is not going to help with lighting our subject, but it's going to make the background feel a lot more alive. So now we have more light in the background, and because we're using natural lighting in this situation, we're not getting that really good rim light that we got in the other shot. So one of the tricks that I really want to show you guys is that if you can't create enough exposure contrast in camera by turning on lights in the background, by getting a light on your subject better, what you can do is change the shirt color or the color of the clothes that your subject is wearing. So Kimberlea is going to go switch her shirt really quick to create more contrast.
You're back.
So as you can see, we have Kimberlea. She changed her outfit to create more contrast with the background, which makes her as the subject stand out more. And we have this practical light on the back left, and we have this practical light on the back right. So you can see the before and after, before and after. So now that we really got our framing and our lighting really nailed, I want to show you guys the difference between having a very shallow depth of field, a wide aperture, and having a very narrow aperture with less depth of field, and how big of a difference that makes with a shooting scenario like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna increase our aperture, which is gonna bring down our depth of field, and it's gonna make everything in the frame a lot more in focus. And I'm going to bring up the ISO to make up for that increase in aperture so I can get the exposure right. And so here you can see the difference between an f10 with the subject and the background, and the difference between an f2.8 with the subject and the background. So right now we're at 28 millimeters, and I want to touch on focal length before we wrap up this learning lesson. So this is a really comfortable framing. She's framed on the thirds. We're at a good distance where if she was talking to the camera, explaining something, we would be able to connect with her and it would look aesthetically pleasing. If we were to go from 28 millimeters to something much more zoomed in, like 60 millimeters, this is a completely different focal length that creates a completely different feeling. She didn't move, the camera didn't move, what she would be doing when it changed, but this would completely change the way you would feel about what she was saying. So it's something to really keep in mind when you're setting up your framing. You want to always be thinking about how you want your viewer to feel. So if I move it back out to a little bit wider, this is, now we're at 24, which is a little bit too wide for the situation. But what I want to do before we wrap up here is, of course, when we just went to 60, it was too close. But if we move the camera further back and keep our subject where they are, and now what we did was we moved about 10 feet away from our subject and we zoomed in to 70 millimeters. So at 5 feet away from our subject, 70 millimeters was way too close. But with 10 feet distance, if you have that kind of room to move around in your scenario, you can actually get a really great compressed image with a very shallow depth of field by moving far back and increasing your focal length, making the number go higher, which creates a much more telephoto field of view. So you guys can see the difference between 5 feet away at 28 millimeters and now 10 feet away at 70 millimeters. Same scenario, different focal length, different distance from the subject to the camera, completely different aesthetic. Perfect, and so that wraps it up for this session with Kimberlea and I. I will link her YouTube channel, all her social media on the page right here. You guys can click and check out all of the offerings that she has. And I wanted to just recap really quickly all of our before and after shots that we did in this session. So here is the before and after with our artificial lighting setup. You can see with and without the colored gels, and with and without using a hair light, and the two different options of having high key lighting and low key lighting. And here are the examples that we shot in natural light. Our before, where we're not using the lighting properly in our surroundings, with and without practicals in the background, and shooting at 28 millimeters versus 70 millimeters with more distance between our camera and our subject. And so that about wraps it up for this portion of lighting, camera types, lens choice, focal length, and focus in this part of the course. I will see you in the next lecture. Alrighty, so now that you guys have been able to really see a behind the scenes look at how I choose my backgrounds, choose my lighting scenarios, set all the functions and settings on my camera, now it's your turn. It's your turn to film a talking scene with your phone or your camera. And something that I want you guys to keep in mind while going through this learning exercise is that ideally you're actually talking to the camera and we'll be using your words or the topic that you're talking about to create a shot list of cutaway shots. Basically, it'll look something like this. But I am addicted to coffee. I just love the entire experience of it. those lovely textured beans and then brewing it when you pour that. So it's pretty straightforward. Now it's your turn to shoot. You're gonna film one talking shot in 2 different ways, okay? The first way is gonna be the standard shot without any of the techniques that we've discussed so far in this course. This might be the way that you would film your video normally without having any idea of these new techniques and principles. And then the second way is gonna be your upgraded shot with these new techniques that you've learned. And that's gonna be framing, shot type, focus, exposure, distance between the subject and the background, right? Using a contrast in coloring, using lighting, and using good sound techniques. Then you're gonna export your video link or screenshots with the standard and upgraded shot, one after the other, to the course Q&A. That way you can engage with your classmates, they can engage with you, you guys can critique each other's work, and you can all see how you can improve on your talking video shot for all your future videos. So hopefully that makes sense, and I will see you guys in the next lecture.